ourselves, starting with Mr. Flynn.
Patrick Flynn, Assembly.
Amy Domboski, Assembly.
Tim Steele, Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston, Assembly.
Chris Birch, Assembly.
Jim Posey, Municipal Light Power.
Rick Miller, Municipal Light Power.
And commission members.
Johnny Gibbons, Municipal Light and Power Commission.
Okay, so the two things we're going to discuss today are, first of all, the 5-year gas purchase agreement, and then the rate increase. Which would you rather address first?
Well, let's start with the rate increase because it's just an introduction of the thought to you. We're not prepared to make a presentation to you today because we're still putting the data together and putting the dashboards together so that the numbers compared rates to other utilities and all of that stuff that
Okay.
we're doing. But that probably deserves a full 45 minutes to an hour either work session or expanded enterprise committee.
Right.
To you as to how to do it. Probably the enterprise committee is probably the best forum. for
Right,
doing it.
but we'd probably open it up, but
Yeah.
because it looks like you're coming for a rather large one. I think we're probably going to have to
Yes.
spend some time on it.
And if I may, if Jim could just give you a reason as to why the
Yeah,
possibilities of
and
rate
George,
changes.
you're not on the record either.
George Michaelis, Municipal Manager, thank you.
Yeah,
And Ernie Hall just joined us. Wouldn't sit next to me because my feet.
I noticed that, so, but I'll take it too. There we are. The primary push is that we finally got the numbers from, and closed out the numbers on the building of the SPP. Our 30% share of that came in roughly $111 million, and the cost recovery for that, we are not receiving, even though we're paying those costs, including operating costs. So you have to go for a rate case in order to put that in. That rate case shortage is about $22 million, $17 million of that is driven just by the cost of SPP, the capital cost, and somewhat the operating costs. And so that's what we'll be talking to you at the next session, but I thought it was wise to introduce the concept and the reason now, so we can have the broader discussion with all the charts and everything.
And also I just, had my weekend reading. And I noticed your revenues are down.
Yeah.
And various different forms of revenues are down. First of all, with your revenues, how much do you think that is caused by conservation, switching out lights, whatever?
That is a small percentage that we see, which is less than other utilities because most of my customers are commercial institution otherwise. The largest single driver of that, I think will show up in the numbers, is when the city starts selling gas to Doyon, which produces electricity, it backs out the military revenue, and as you can see in those charts, the largest customer is the military, both Richardson and Elmendorf. And when you take off half of Richardson's, 4 or 5 megawatts a day out of our revenue and give it to Doyon, which gives it to the city through the gas sales, that is a direct reduction.
But it also seems like your commercial revenues are down too.
A little bit, yeah. But as part of that, and we'll discuss that, is driven by COPA. Every year, we do a swing.
Right.
If we over-recover, we turn upside down and start recovering, and that reduces the revenue. And those dynamics are driven just by the regulatory environment that we're in. We're rate-based rate of return. So basically, as our costs go seesaw, our revenues will go up or down accordingly.
And in the last couple of years, your assets have decreased.
Yes.
So, anyway, I'm just bringing these up, so as you prepare for your dashboards, I think revenues decreasing, your assets decreasing, SAP, not SAP.
Yeah. SPP.
SPP.
All these S's.
We'll need further and very detailed information on those and what's causing it. The other part, and other members are welcome to add your list of what you'd like to see in a work session on the rate increase, but we kind of went through this whole same kind of discussion with AWWU and expenses. And so, again, doing expenses to compensate for some things that are fixed declines. So, anybody else for questions for them for a work session for the?
Well, I guess one of the, obviously the primary drivers, fuel cost.
Yes.
Right? Fuel costs, and, reading ahead a little bit here, I see a $9.25 an MCF price in your projected 2019 numbers here with ConocoPhillips contract. An update that might be helpful is I went to the Regulatory Commission briefing by the conglomeration of MLP and Chigach and whoever else was involved on importing natural gas as a backstop to if there's lack of availability. As I recall, there's some discussion there about the cost per MCF for bringing gas up from, obviously there's a whole lot of, has to happen on both ends, but it might be helpful, if you're getting in the $9 an MCF, and I don't know what it costs to move gas from Western Canada to Anchorage, in a tanker, but, it might be constructive to have some of that discussion, and I don't know if it'd be appropriate in work session, but since a large, what percentage of the rate is based on fuel price?
For us, fuel runs about 30%, 40%. Regular cost.
It's actually on page 19 of the audited financials, 19 or 21, and one of those
I was just curious.
Yeah.
About 10, actually, the cost of the fuel is only about, in 12 is 10%, 22% and 11, and it fluctuates on how much gas we're buying.
Yeah.
The cost of our VRU gas, you don't see as expense. That flows through the calculation of the revenue requirement that determines the gas transfer price that did drop last July of 2012, down to the lowest it's ever been, about $2.22. And that drives the COPA to be lower. And that's one of the big reasons the revenues are actually lower in 12 compared to 11. We bought a lot of gas in 2011.
It'd be
$23
helpful to
million.
see how that kind of plays into the, certainly within the forecast timeframe here, what that option looks like, what those cost pieces are, and whether that's a consideration at all.
Yeah, and our operating and capital budget going forward, which is part of our budget for this year, we'll also have some of those because some of that's still developing. What we've done, as you know, from the long-term gas supply meetings, is that we kicked the can down the road. There was, switching to the gas contract now. Nobody was willing. We only had one party that was willing to sell us gas going out 6 years from to date. The others were willing to go out, 3 to 4 years, and then say we'll negotiate what that means later. And after the caps come off, driven by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. To put it in context, we sold gas last year, 11, 14, $22 an M. Which is a lot larger than any of these numbers, which tells you that the market's really driven by, and will be from now on, take or pay, solid gas, and if you need extra gas, you will pay emergency prices for it. And those prices generally do not have a cap like the FTC has on Hillcorp as the result of buying those assets.
And that's a 4-year cap, right?
It's 4-year cap. And
But actually, we're getting ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves. Back to the
Thanks.
work session on rate increase. Anything else that any of you would like to bring up? I guess the only other thing that I'd be really interested in, especially with the SPP expense, it would be interesting for me if you could break down your cost centers, of your different power generation plants and how much each costs and what you're projecting forward as far as your new plants, so we can get an idea of cost and how everything balances out, and broken down with each plant. So I'd like to have sort of your cost centers, and then you can break out administration. But so much more specific. I mean, this is good, but I'd like to see it broken down so we can compare SPP with MLMP. And each, especially as we're going for new plants, what the cost benefit of that is.
And the real cost benefit of the new plant is you do less maintenance when you buy new.
Right, but I want to see it per
No,
plant.
what numbers are there?
Yeah.
Just put it into context for you. And the capital cost, as
Right.
is shown in the rate cases driven here, you have to pay for these things, but it's a declining balance, so over time.
You get to
But what
bring it-
happens with old equipment that's 35 or 40 years old, your curve for maintenance keeps going up exponentially.
Right, and
That's
I
the
just,
reason.
but I want to see the different cost centers, how they've broken out, how they look as far as your new power generation, how does SPP compare? We need to.
Yeah, we're still having discussions with them on the ancillary costs other than what we've paid them already, because operating costs, they have a problem in that they're losing big customers. And so trying to get us to help pay for some of
So
that
anyway,
overhead is
we
something.
need that comparison.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do. Okay.
One last chance, anything else for a work session?
What are you looking at the work section, the 2nd of August?
I'm not sure, they said they need more time to either do
Oh, we'll be ready in a week or two, so you pick the date and
I
we'll
don't
be
know if
ready.
we have enough time in that second to have another work session, do we?
The 2nd we do.
We do? We've got 2 sessions already, so if we aim for the second for the rate increase, would that be all right?
That works for you, Joe?
Anything else before we move on to the gas purchase?
Probably a little more detail at some point on the big customers that are going away that fast,
Talk about that as part of that. That's an overall view, which we can give you. That's basically MEA and HEA starting to provide their own power. That's huge numbers.
What do they think?
You're an optimist. Or pessimist, I'm not sure which one today. Okay. All right. 17 years ago, we entered into, as a city, MLMP, the purchase of Shell's 33% interest in Beluga Gasville.
We call it the Brian Davies Act?
The Brian Davies Act. And, or the Brian Davies Maelstrom yin and yang, you can call it that too. But that happened, and we bought a lot of gas at what oil companies thought at that time was paying twice the price that they would be willing to pay for it. And so they weren't exactly happy that the city walked in and bid a price that Shell wanted or needed in order to walk out the door, and they did. Over the years, that has created about $500 million in revenue. $500 million flowed through the system as a consequence of paying $122 million, basically, for that asset. We have been able to parlay that into, over the last 6 to 7 years, 94 to 97, 98% of the gas we need to run the utility, to provide electrons, to sell to Golden Valley, to sell to Chugach Electric. We've been able to do that. We sold both gas and electricity by virtue of owning that field. We are still underlifted in that field to the tune of about 3 BCF, billion cubic feet, as opposed to our other 33% owners. We are underlifted as opposed to what they're taking. ConocoPhillips is now taking somewhere between 16 to 12%. we're taking 50%, we're taking 50% last week, and the 22 to 30% of it being taken by Hillcorp. So we were actually underlifting the whole field as partners, because the real need for gas is in the wintertime for their sales. Conoco sells to both Instar and, to Instar and Chugat Electric.
Will you explain underlifting? Could you please explain underlifting?
Underlifting is if the field can produce 30 billion cubic feet a year, and all the partners take 10 billion cubic feet a year, then everybody equally shares. If one partner takes 7.5 billion and the other two take their 10, then that 2.5 billion is underlifted in the accounting standards that account for how much gas is there and how much you took. And at the end of every year, you have to account for that. And you either let it stay in the ground and recover it later, or if the field ends, you get a check for a small amount of money at the end. So what we have chosen to do is do our underlifts and keep the gas, because what that allows us to do is in the wintertime, instead of buying gas at $14 to $22, we generally use our underlifted gas, which allows us to take somewhere in the zone of 40% up to 50% of the gas being produced in the wintertime, and use it for our uses as that little uptick happens for us. It's a big uptick for Instar, but it's a small uptick for us. And when we do maintenance, we can burn 37 million a day. This week we were burning, I think, 24 million. So we fluctuate from 22 to 37 million a day in burning gas to make electrons. So, given that, looking forward to the decline of the field, we knew that we needed gas going out until hopefully the gas line is closer than it is today. And so in our discussions, we thought that basically the information the mayor had from the Energy Task Force, that to go out as far as you can for a contract, it would be the best thing. And if we could get 5 to 6 years, let's go for it. And so we went around and got, this is the only responsive one that takes us out to 2019. And at gas prices that are equivalent or lower than anything we might see. And the latter years, some of them were brought up, are basically looked at in calculated on the basis of what oil prices is selling for now and where it might be, because most oil companies want to recover hydrocarbon to hydrocarbon, and they want to lock it in, but they can't bracket it exactly with oil, so they give you a range, and what you see here is that. But I can tell you that the anticipated price before FTC stepped in, the price that was being offered by the parties was larger than any number on this sheet. And the FTC limited that back down to 686, 742 over the 4 years. And I fully expect that price to be higher, starting at 18, 19, 20, 21. And the cost of importing gas, you asked that, is probably going to be north of 14 to 18 bucks. From what we know today, from all the studies that we as utilities have paid to do. And what you see there is that, we are getting a somewhat small percentage growing as to what we actually take in BCFs. If we're taking almost 3 BCF, actually almost 5 BCF in 2017, that probably will represent 30 to 40% of our needs. And, but we hope that Beluga will still produce, our partners will still help us drill wells and get gas out of there. That's every year, every quarter, every month discussion that we as owners get together and say, what is the relative value of drilling wells? we have a new estimate of how much gas is actually being left in the field today to be recovered over the next 10 to 12 years. The numbers look good, 250 billion probably in place. 70 billion of that belongs to ML&P, and the value of that is anywhere from 165 million to almost $500 million. So the cost of this, the 155 million over the series of years, is a percentage of the total value of what we still own in the Beluga gas field. It is still an investment that still pays off.
Chris?
Where are you at with the storage facility? Well, I mean, I don't have a sense for how much is in the ground at Beluga, and then what percentage of what you own that's in the ground at Beluga is in the storage facility. Is it just a fraction?
It's a fraction. What we own is working gas in the storage facility, and it equates to 0.6 billion, a little over $500 million. And but we can only take that out at anywhere from 7 to about 3 to 7 billion. I mean, 3 to 7 million a day. There's a limit on what the field will produce.
And that's filled up now, right?
We are at 5,999. I mean, if you have more, you pay a penalty. So we stopped at 5,999. So.
But Singsma as a whole is full at this point.
Thank you, top off.
There are topped off under the contract 11 BCF, but the field actually with additional wells and compression can be pushed up to 18 billion cubic feet a day, which would represent basically almost 2 years of use by ML&P alone. So it is a percentage. As Chris knows, we're not where we need to be in storage going forward. Discussions are going to be held over the next few years that we really need 28 to 38 billion cubic feet stored in order to meet the winter needs. And that's the number that comes from both Instar and Hillcorp. So somewhere between 28 billion and 37 billion. That's 3 times what's in there today. And so we need 1 or 2 more fields with gas to provide what you need as emergency gas and what you need as peaking gas.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Thanks, Jennifer. Jim, is there a particular reason for the reduction in quantities that we're contracting for in the out years? Our BCF drops.
Yes. That BCF drops only because Conoco.
Being confident they can produce more.
That's right. They can only sell what they have and what their Netherland and Sewell or whoever produces a report for them, and the same thing for Hillcorp. That's why they're only going out 4 years. It's just that Conoco didn't have a lot of long-term contracts going out forward, and so therefore we swooped in and said, well, this is what we'd like to have, and they said this is what we have to sell. That's it. And so for those 2 years, we'll either be negotiating for the difference between 438 and 292 with other utilities, or drilling, hopefully, out of the Beluga and finding more gas. Those options will be for someone else to work at. My job is to do what I can with what we got.
Oh, so you're retiring between now and 2018?
Somewhere between now and 19, I fully expect to be retired. I'm 67 this year, young man.
George?
Yeah, and as you know, Patrick, that's no different than what they do today. They're buying spot gas here and there, making up the difference anyway. So that's what they plan on doing in those out years as well.
I hope not. I hope they're going to have longer term agreements in place in the next 2 or 3 years, not spot gas.
Well, if in fact they can, if that doesn't happen, at least they've got this. And then the other thing is, several years ago, the Assembly did allow for ML&P to negotiate short-term contracts, and then we just inform you afterwards. So the reason that we're before you today on this particular one, obviously, is it's not short-term, and so it exceeds the, I think it was a three-year term that you had before on negotiating terms. So this exceeds that, so that's why we're here, to basically answer any questions or anything that you have.
In fact, we're negotiating a short-term contract to get us out to 14 with one or two other producers, so that we can get over into 14 where this kicks in. But I'm with you on longer-term contracts. It was the RCA that said they didn't want these things to be longer at one time.
Yeah, they screwed us up with
Thank
Marathon badly.
God.
It cost a lot.
Yeah,
Cost us
Yeah. So,
Yeah, right.
but being a prudent,
$100 million.
right.
Cost
That's why we're here today.
being a prudent manager of a prudent utility, you don't want less than 5 years supply. Kind of assured or know where you're gonna get it, and therein, with those 2 years still out there, we will still pay money to the long-term gas supply people to be prepared that if nobody in the inlet can meet that, we can turn around and get it done. And that's what we're, a big part of what we spend money on. Okay?
Didn't mean to elicit that, or rip off that scab, sorry.
Yeah, well, we've only talked about it for the last 5 years.
5 years. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
It's just a comment for you as a group, is that in my conversations with the current commission, as it's made up, I don't think that this, if we sign this by the end of the month, we get through the assembly and we're done. I fully expect this to be hopefully approved by sometime in August and September, rather than the RCA taking the full 6 months, which is why this timeline is driven by what we have to do now, is that if they took their full 6 months, then we'd be into December, January, with an approval of this contract. I think, from my experiences of being a former commissioner, they're gonna take these things to a tariff meeting and just approve them. I think that tomorrow morning, Instar is making a presentation to the commission on their ConocoPhillips contract. I expect MEA and the others to follow. The general manager of MEA told me in Fairbanks in our meeting last week that he's waiting for us to go first. So everybody is playing a little chess card with where they are, but the FTC sets the price for the first 3 or 4 years. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Has everybody got the same deal?
We don't know.
No, generally not. Well, I think that the FTC set the price for the 3 years, 4 years, and what you will not see for a while is anybody else having anything going on in the out years.
Yeah.
For any large volumes of gas. I mean, some of the small producers out there are offering a million here, a million there, 2 million there, in order to pay for their wells that they've drilled. But when you talk about it, 70% of the gas production is controlled by Hillcorp. The other 30% is controlled by ML&P and ConocoPhillips. And the other pieces of that are just small bits and pieces.
No questions.
You'll see what everyone else's deal is later.
Maybe.
No, you will. It all have to go through the
It's all
RCA.
public, yeah.
Everything is filed before the RCA, and as when we were negotiating with Hillcorp, as we still are today, on the interim gas, it takes us through the end of the year, and any gas we might need beyond that. They wanted everybody to go in on the same day, same time. Before Dan Sullivan got involved, that's Dan Sullivan, the commissioner, Hillcorp was only gonna do 1-year contracts. Do you remember that? And we as utilities, and I as Jim Posey, basically said, we can't handle that on a year-to-year basis. As utilities, we need some certainty. And so what we have is an offer for longer-term contracts, which is good.
RCA won't be surprised about the prices.
And they're not even, still, they're not surprised about the numbers we're talking about long-term gas, about what you may have to pay to be prepared to import gas. They look at that as being an insurance policy. Sometimes you have to go out and buy one.
Don't ever count on irrational decisions by the RCA.
Oh, come on.
Sorry.
Well,
I was there when you became a commissioner.
I know.
Reportedly, the Japanese were offering 14 when we were talking about buying gas from the islands.
Does the committee want to take a position on this?
We shouldn't. I mean, it's fine, but we shouldn't.
Just
That's not how we do it.
Just asking. Oh, sometimes it is. We have.
Well.
I'm up for however you feel.
It is in pace today. We'd like for it to be on the approval for the next assembly meeting. So I think that Wheeler told me he made one change in it, dealing with the last line.
Mr. Dombrowski has a couple other ones.
You could make a couple grammatical changes, just a suggestion.
Remember, this has not gone through the full scrutiny.
I was gonna say, it's like, where's Waldo? I won't tell you where they are, we'll just see if you find them.
Let's see if I can find it.
I counted two.
The ones we
But
described ahead.
remember, right now, it's just in pace, it hasn't gone through the whole process yet, so. Hopefully, all of these things will be fixed by the time it comes out. But if you want to share with me,
I'll let you peek.
So you'll have this ready for the addendum?
Yes.
it will be by noon tomorrow.
On one.
By noon on Friday, yeah. I think that's the deadline for the addendum.
Okay. Well,
These LLCs
so
are
we'll
patient.
have the rate increase work session on the 2nd of August.
I did notice that.
As I said, some of those comments can be incorporated in your presentation, it'd be great. And I think we're adjourned unless anybody has anything else to say.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.